something that happens on a job, a difficult conversation they need to have with a client, they tend to start justifying their position and their action and things, talking about how we got there and whose fault it is that they think it is. And it's like, okay, hold on. Let's just focus on putting ourselves in that client's shoes. If I'm them, what do I want? What would a good outcome look like for me as the client?
You're listening to the Profit by Design podcast, episode 58. You work hard in your business. On the Profit by Design podcast, we ask the big question: what has your business done for you lately? Hi, I'm Dr. Sabrina Starling, the business psychologist, the author of How to Hire the Best, and your co-host on the Profit by Design podcast. Weekly, my co-host, Mike Bruno, and I bring you tips, tools, and strategies from our own experiences and from the experiences of our guests, who are entrepreneurial thought leaders and real-life entrepreneurs, all to support you in making intentionally profitable and sustainable business decisions to live the lifestyle you desire. So Chad, Diane, Mike, it's good to have all of you here on the podcast. This is exciting. We are 1 week away from the How to Hire the Best book launch, and it's available for pre-sale right now. Chad and Diane and Mike, you all three are featured prominently in the book with respect to insights that you've had as you've started to implement the How to Hire the Best strategies, and things that you've learned and things that you do differently now to create a great place to work. Your business is Hatfield Builders and Remodelers in Plano, Texas. And both of you have been very intentional about the workplace that you want to create. And so on the podcast today, I'm really eager to get into what your experiences were like before you got intentional around hiring and team building, and what were some of the employee experiences you had, really looking at what the impact is on you guys as business owners when you're not intentional with the employees and the team that you hire. And then we'll talk about what's different. And what I'm really excited to share today is a tool that we share at Tap the Potential with our business owners, and it's called the Choice Map, and it has a significant impact on mindset. So that's where we're headed. Before we dive in, I want to let you know where you can get your copy of the How to Hire the Best book. The pre-sale copy is available from tapthepotential.com/book. And if you want to join our ambassador group and help us be a part of getting the word out about the How to Hire the Best strategies, and that there are solutions for entrepreneurs to this big hiring challenge, you can join us over in the ambassador group. Chad, Diane, and Mike are all over there with us. And we're going to be having some fun contests, prizes, and giveaways, opportunities to win scholarships to my updated How to Hire the Best live course that's going to happen in November, and those will be full ride scholarships into that course. But you have to be a part of the ambassador group. To get access to that, hop on over to tapthepotential.com/ambassadors. Chad and Diane, welcome.
Thanks, Sabrina.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Yeah. Chad, you've been on the Profit by Design podcast a couple of times now, sharing stories that we just can't make up. It's real life stories about what you've dealt with employees and what you've learned.
Yes, and I believe there's a 4-letter word in there. You can't make this blank up.
Yeah, we all know what that word is, right?
Right. I think Mike knows what I'm talking about. Diane surely does. We've had enough discussions about it in the hot tub over the last few years.
Yeah, so employees can cause a lot of heartache for us business owners.
It can be your greatest asset or your greatest weakness. And what I've really, as I reflect back on where we've been and where we've gotten to, because in the past, I would have always focused on the negative, and that would only take us to a negative place. There's a simple truth, and I think Larry Janeski says it in his book. He says, the business is a reflection of the owner and his or her thoughts. And I've found that to be very, very true. As I look back, I printed off org charts from 2012 all the way to now. I emailed them to Diane. These are the ones we did for Remodelers Advantage. So everybody's graded, have their salaries, disc profiles, and everything for, back to 2012. And I can see in that some pretty clear patterns that where the business has followed my state all the way from there and my journey upwards as we have gone. It's been an interesting journey, and I can see the progress just in the organizational charts.
Can you reflect back on what your mindset was like back in 2012? Like if we were to crawl into your head and hear the voice of Chad in 2012, what were some of the things that you were experiencing and saying?
You know, I have a hard time relating to where I was. And as you know, the ADHD diagnosis I could use as a crutch right now, which I got diagnosed earlier this year, and say I don't remember all of that because I don't remember a lot of it, but I remember enough bits and pieces. And it's a lot of, I have something to prove. I had insecurities about myself, didn't care enough about myself, insecure about a lot of things in my own life about me. And I felt like in a way, I needed to prove to the world and to others my worth through everything that I did. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that, either being there right now or having been there in the past. Do you remember what it felt like to live in that mindset?
Yeah, it's a chaotic, anxiety-ridden mindset of going from one thing to another, always trying to get things done and severely concerned with what people think of you and how people see you and how to control that. And as I know now, control is just fear, right? An attempt to control is fear. I can only control myself. I can't control how other people receive things. I can only control me. And that's a big mindset shift, especially when you're dealing with clients, employees, vendors. It's not an honoring way to be to everyone else, to be in that headspace, that mindset.
Diane, what do you remember about what life was like at that time and how you experienced things?
So for Chad, things have not come easily with the business. It's been that he's done every part of every role at some point over the last 15 years that we've been in business. And the staff that we've had to bring on to help us with the volume of business that we have been able to sell, it's been difficult for them to measure up to what Chad has been able to do. And it gets him in this mindset, I'm just going to do it myself because it's just not good enough. And it leads into that, that mindset that I have to put on this perfect facade for everyone. And it's so stressful because he carries it and he wants to do the best he possibly can. And he knows that things can be done better. But at the same time, he's got to delegate and he's got to figure out what's most important. And with ADHD, delegating and figuring out what's most important is like scrambling eggs and just not having a plan. And it's difficult. The prioritization is difficult. And so it just goes from one to the next to the next. And you just stay in this okay, I'm going to put out this fire and this fire and this fire and this fire and this fire. And it just keeps going. And so I think for Chad, until he really turned and looked within himself and figured out, this is me, and I've got to figure out what's going on with me and how can I do things differently and better and control my thoughts and my actions, then my outcomes will be better.
That's such a powerful statement there about his awareness and how you saw that shift and how he started turning things in his head and looking at what his role is. I remember when Mike introduced me to you guys and Chad started talking about the difference that he saw in Mike. So Mike, I'm going to put you on the hot seat here a little bit. Do you remember what your mindset was?
Sure. Probably very similar, to Chad in the sense that, I'm definitely the squirrel chaser, and I would definitely, beat myself up to no end, internalize everything, and, constantly, be putting one fire out to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and live in just a very unsettled mindset. So I always felt like, what am I not doing right to, I can't fix myself because I'm fixing all these other things. And then, as you know, Sabrina, prior to us working together, I was very frustrated and angry, and I was taking that frustration and anger out on employees, and not in an aggressive way because it's just not my demeanor, but I think in a passive aggressive way, and or just a dismissive way. So I would dismiss their thoughts, their good actions, their bad actions, and I just became very robotic in the sense of, I have to put this fire out, this fire out, this fire out, and go, 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 go. Nobody's as good as me. Nobody's better. It's impossible for me to find people, but it was certainly, extremely unsettling mindset to have because it drips into your personal life as well. And, the impact on my family life and the way that I interacted with my wife and my kids and, just everything. So once I, was able to work on the tools of changing my mindset and getting out of that trap was really when I started to be able to rebuild myself foundationally, and really just observe that my thoughts, the way that I'm acting or, not acting is directly impacting everything around me.
Yeah. And, the mindset work is really at the core of all of this. I hear you and Chad and Diane, all three of you speaking to, it's working on ourselves that starts to produce the change. And so, if we start looking externally and we blame the employees and we say, my business is really stressful and it's always me all the time. I've got to keep everything going. I can't count on people. It sounds like we're blaming employees, like they're all terrible. And really what it is we've got to look at ourselves first and look at how do we become the leader we need to be to have this team that we want to have. And Mike, one of the things that when I knew the real change had happened for you was when Chad commented, Mike's different. Chad, do you remember that?
Oh, I do. If I said he was like a disgruntled, angry, upset, frustrated person, I might not be using enough adjectives, but I was exactly the same way. And you get into that mindset of just being, it's like the world is just against you because nobody cares as much. Nobody's going to follow through. Nobody's going to pick the balls up. And you get really jaded. I think it was 2013, is when I met Mike. And there was another guy in one of the groups that we met that wrote down on a card, and I used to have it on my wall, and I got to find it, put it back on my wall. But we wrote down things that we wanted to share with each other, and none of us read any of the cards until we got home. And mine started off, mind you, this is a guy I met 2 days before. And he says, you enjoy making others happy and helping people. You also exploit your talents in such a way to make others feel useless and unworthy. And I'm reading this in my office on a Saturday by myself, and I'm thinking, well, that's a little bit harsh. And there's a few other sentences in the middle of that. And at the end, he wrote probably the most profound thing that I've come across on my journey, at least one of them. He wrote, build others up while learning humility and reach your true potential. That is probably the entire theme of my whole journey from then to now. Build others up while learning humility and reach your true potential. I didn't even understand how profound that was at the time. And I called him that Saturday after I read it. I cried for probably 20 minutes because I knew he was right. And I couldn't deny that. I had to face that truth. And it was sobering and hard for me to accept, but that was the truth. And I called him and he actually took my call, and I could tell he was scared when I was talking to him. And I just said, Al, I want to tell you, thank you for showing me that and writing this down. And he said, are you serious? I said, yeah. And he goes, I wrote that and I thought he will never speak to me again, but I have to tell him he needs to see this. And I am profoundly grateful to this day for him doing that.
That triggered a huge shift in you.
The start, yes. And it's taken 6 years to get to this point of extremely intentional thinking and exploring and realizing that the business is a reflection of me and my thoughts. And others in the business are not necessarily going to be in the same place as me. Other people will, in a lot of ways, it's very uncomfortable for people to face the harsh truths about themselves. It's so easy to blame other people for things. I think I shared with you yesterday that I believe it was in a Gay Hendricks book. He said, I think it was criticism and blame are two of the most addictive things on the planet, if not the most addictive things on the planet. And what it all comes back to is if you're blaming others, well, then you're a victim and you're not responsible for it. It's not your fault. Other people are doing it. Accept the path, though. building others up and learning humility is the antithesis of that. It's accepting responsibility for everything that occurs around you and everything that you control yourself. Others will not embrace that to the same degree because it takes a lot of courage to face those inner demons.
Yes, it does. Sure does. Diane, what do you notice is different about Chad from how he was 6 or 7 years ago?
Definitely will take a situation that, is kind of painful for either staff, clients, with a vendor. And he's a lot more thoughtful about things. And whereas someone, even myself included, will come to him and say, well, this is going on, and my voice ratchets up 10 octaves, and I am like, blah, 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 stressed out about something that's going on, or we're losing money on something, whatever it is. And he just will pause and say, all right, let's pause. And there's always something he has to say that I haven't thought of yet. And I think that's true for just about everybody in our company. It's usually something about the answer lies someplace in the middle. It's not one extreme or the other. And that thought goes back to not playing the victim, not being the victim, and saying, okay, what was my responsibility? What was my role in it? Asking me to ask myself that. And then thinking from the other side of it is, what was their role in it? Okay, could they have done differently, better? Yes. Now, how can we communicate better about that together and identify ways to just solve it and keep going? And the calmness in which he takes things on now from 6 years ago is like night and day. You'd think I married Buddha. It's just totally different. And it's amazing to see just how calm he can remain when there are things that I know 6 years ago he would have punched a hole in the wall.
Wow, that's significant. So Chad, you were starting to talk about what you saw that's different about Mike, and I'm really curious to hear that.
I mean, Mike and I are very similar in a lot of ways, and just the frustration. And that I think Mike has really been on kind of that same journey as me of realizing, oh, wait a minute, I think I might have something to do with this. And Mike has just been more calm as well. I mean, the difference that I saw in Mike then, he wasn't in a frantic state running around like crazy, like, oh my God, I got to do this. Oh, I got to go over here. Oh, this person dropped that ball. I must pick it up. No one can do it as good as me. And that was seeing him calm down and not seeing those things anymore was opened my eyes to that being a real possibility. Mike can do that, and Mike can make that shift. Not that Mike was perfect. He continues to make progress like the rest of us, but Mike had that profound shift. I can do that. I see it. It's possible.
That, what you're speaking to right there, is the part that I love so much about what we do at Tap the Potential, because if you just work with me as a coach one-on-one, you don't get that experience of interacting with other business owners and witnessing their growth. And that, like when we're coming together at the retreats and you guys are interacting with each other, one person is a step ahead, one person is a step behind, the person and some people are in the middle. And it creates this group environment where the growth just flourishes because you're seeing the changes in each other and reflecting it back to each other. It's extraordinarily powerful. And I want to share here with our profit designers that I've done lots of mindset work with clients over the years. And what I really enjoy at this point in my career and being about 15 years into this is I know a lot about what doesn't work. So I've stopped doing those things and I've been able to pick out the tools that immediately have impact. And one of those is the choice map. And it's something that I shared with Mike early on in our work together. I shared it with you, Chad and Diane, earlier in our work together. And I saw all three of you, when I shared it, light bulbs go off and you're coming back the next week and things are different. You're handling things different. You're seeing, and Diane, you're speaking to that pause, like when you bring something to Chad and you're wound up and you see him pause, and that creates that space for more thoughts, more ideas to come in. And when we don't pause, when we just keep going, we go straight into what we call the judger pit. And so what the choice map gets at is that we operate from a set of non-conscious questions all the time. And so a circumstance or some event will happen to us and throws us off course, and non-consciously automatic questions start going through our head, and they're usually judger questions. And the judger questions sound something like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with them? Why can't they get this right? Why didn't we just have this talk a couple of days ago? Why are they doing that again? What the heck? Why? I just want to throw in the towel and give up. This is crazy. Why do I keep doing this? Does that resonate with anybody's judger?
Yeah, I mean, that whole exercise was one of the biggest pivotal points for me, because I always focused on fixing things and then thinking that it was my responsibility to fix everybody else before I fix myself. And, there was some really key, points where, we were discussing that, right? And my main problem back then was I read all the books and I had the tactical knowledge. However, I didn't have the mindset shift to be able to utilize any of those tools to be able to grow from it. And that was one of the tools that, I relied on, and I still heavily rely on, is just, taking that pause, like Chad said, stepping back, taking the pause and reevaluating things from a different perspective, and then being able to move forward.
Yeah.
I think one of the most critical parts of that is, and as you're saying that, I pull that up and I know there's a couple team members that I need to send that to and talk to about, but focusing on the outcome you want, not the outcome you fear. Right? Fear takes us to a place where, just like an animal, if you picture, like I go for a walk in the morning, and I usually am walking at 5:30 in the morning, and where we live, there's tons of rabbits in Plano. And rabbits, they'll run in all sorts of directions really fast, and then they'll sit in the grass in the middle of plain view of everything and try to remain still as if they can't see you. And they're just paralyzed with fear, and they do nothing but sit there unless you get super close, and then they run as fast as they can away. And when you're in any situation, difficult situation with an employee, difficult situation with a client, if you can interject a pause in your own mind and stop and think about what is the right outcome that is going to be mutually beneficial and honoring to both parties in this. What is that outcome? What does it look like? How could I describe it? And then I'm going to go into that, and I'm going to try to refocus everyone's attention as they go right to blame. Whose fault is it? How is it not my fault? Let me justify my own actions. Those are usually the responses, right? I don't want to be in trouble, Dad. Don't take my TV away, right? It's okay to let them say those things and then say, we could talk about things like that, but would it be all right if we could just go back to that outcome that we talked about at the beginning, right at the start of this discussion, of what is the right outcome? And the more effective you can get at doing that, the better you're going to be in every situation. And it takes you remaining calm. It takes you bringing, a peaceful presence to all those conversations, which is the antithesis of how I used to be.
So you can't be that fearful rabbit to get that result.
No.
Diane, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say, it just leads me to what our marriage coaches, Richard and Gina Lynn, would say is eat your M&Ms, meaning you got to have the right mindset and you got to have the maturity. And the maturity part of it is, okay, do I want to deal with this? No, I don't want to deal with this, but I must. So I'll do it anyways. And so being in the place where you can deal with it and saying, okay, I have to do this. This is just part of being an adult, adulting here. And run into the fire, if there is one, and dealing with it. Put on your big girl panties and just deal with it. And when you do that and you come to it from a place of, okay, this is right. This is what I want the outcome to be. No, I don't want to argue with you. No, I don't want to run away from this anymore. If I leave the festering wound to fester, it will turn septic and it will kill me. So what do I want to do? I want to just pick this up, clean it up, and let's move on. And I think the faster you can do that, the easier you can recognize where you're at with something, and knowing that you got to get up, you got to fix it, and you got to move on, and just having tough conversations and staying in that mindset of what do we want the outcome to be will be your best bet every time you run into a situation or a problem.
Well, and what do we want the outcome to be is a very powerful question, because it pulls us out of the judger questions, pulls us out of the judger pit, which feels really yucky and gross to be there. And it gets yourself and the whole team asking better questions. And that's really what's at the heart of the choice map, is the questions we ask determine the solutions we find. So if we ask judger questions and we ask whose fault is it, we'll figure out whose fault it is. What good is that going to do, right? It doesn't get us to the solution.
Yeah, that's going to come out in the wash no matter what. And if you ever focus on blame, you're already going down that path, and everyone's going to go down that path, and nobody wins. Nobody wins in an argument, and the argument is in that judger pit, and blame always takes you to that. And the blame's going to work itself out. And it's, we're talking to staff members about something that happens on a job, a difficult conversation they need to have with a client. They tend to start justifying their position and their action and things, talking about how we got there and whose fault it is that they think it is. And it's like, okay, hold on. Let's just focus on putting ourselves in that client's shoes. If I'm them, what do I want? What would a good outcome look like for me as the client? And I'll ask people, picture that. Close your eyes, visualize their house. You park your car in the garage, you're walking in there, what do you want? It's your house. And then we'll talk about that. And realize the blame's going to fall out on the floor. The responsibility is every time.
So, and I want to tie this into a pretty profound insight that I had as I wrote How to Hire the Best Contractors Edition. So when I interviewed you and Diane, Chad, and we talked about what you've learned and what you're working on with your culture, one word that you guys used over and over is respect, that you have a respectful culture. And what's really interesting to me about that is at Tap the Potential, when we bring in new business owners into our exclusive small group coaching program, we ask to have their top employees, their A players, complete an employee survey. And we ask them what they appreciate about their workplace and what makes a great place to work. One of the themes that comes up repeatedly is respect. Somewhere where I'm respected, the owner respects me. And what's interesting to me about that is I hear often about why the business that they're working in with that owner who respects them stands out so much in their head is because oftentimes they've had experience on job sites where the owner has yelled at them, belittled them, put them down in front of the customer, in front of team members. And it's a very humiliating experience. And so this piece about creating a culture of respect is profound. And, in terms of standing out as an employer of choice to be able to attract A players to your business, it's not hard. It's really a matter of being aware of what is the word on the street about your business. And if the word on the street about your business is that is the grumpiest, meanest owner, I don't ever want to work for a guy like that, you're not going to be able to attract A players. But if you're treating your team members with respect, when they're at the barbecue on Friday night talking with their buddies and their buddies are complaining about their boss and what their boss did to them that week, your team member is saying, I'm so glad I work for the Hatfields, or I'm so glad Mike Bruno, oh my gosh, he's not like what you guys are talking about. And what's at the heart of that respectful culture is mindset and asking these learner questions versus the judger questions. Because the judger questions get to blame. The judger questions are what make us angry and fire us up. The learner questions are the ones where we pause and we think about, what do I want? What do they want? What outcome do we want? What are our options? That produces a very different feeling on the team.
Hugely different. Reactivity is almost never going to net you a good outcome. And I was thinking about as I got into the office early this morning to put together some things to talk about this morning, and looking at the org chart and things, I could come up with all sorts of funny stories, and we could talk for hours about it. And at the same time, I have a responsibility and I've had a role, every part of that. And if I ignore that, then I'm just putting myself into that victim position. And, then I'm no longer responsible for it. It's their fault, right? And not to say that they aren't to blame. The answer isn't blame 100% on my side, 100% on theirs. The answer is always in the middle. It's like everything else in life. And it's accepting the responsibility of your own role and being able to see it honestly, that true growth can really occur in you, and you can have the openness to create that humble environment where people want to be. And people don't understand that it comes from a position of humility. But I think it really goes back to what Al said to me of building others up while learning humility and reach your true potential. And combine that with what Richard and Gina Lynn May, Diane and I's marriage coaches, talk about mindset and maturity, M&Ms, right? The mindset's pretty easy. The maturity part can be a little child inside of you just wants to, at least in my little child inside of me, wants to just tell people how they're wrong and what they did and what was their role in it and how can you not see it. And if I do that, I'm not inviting them to the possibility that they need to discover some of that on their own. And I can get them to see parts of that in the questions I ask and not the statements I make. And if they choose not to see it, what does that say about them? It says they're not open. And is that someone that's going to be successful around me? Probably not.
That respect begins with respect for yourself. You cannot have respect for others until you have more and the most respect for yourself first, and knowing what it is that you want ultimately and keep driving towards that.
That's a really great point, Diane. And it's the same thing as love and respect and grace. If you do not have it for yourself first, you have none available for anyone else. And I have learned that firsthand. It's been overwhelming theme on my journey for myself. And as my mind jumps around in this conversation, I also think one of the most important things that other owners need to recognize is getting themselves in the right mindset, having the maturity to act out that mindset, and knowing that as the owner and the boss, you have to be the one to step forward first. You have to be the one to step forward into that right mindset, have the maturity to act it out, and do it first and expect nothing in return. Because the first few times you do that with someone, you will get nothing in return at all. If you walk out of a meeting with somebody where you've stepped forward into that right mindset, had the maturity to act it out in a difficult situation, and they remain in that childlike blaming position, it's natural a good number of times until they can see it. So if you get discouraged immediately because you're like, man, I just approached that in a really great way. And I'm oddly speaking from experience, right? I could come up with some oddly specific examples if we wanted to, but I won't. You get discouraged. At least I have in the past. I've gotten discouraged with people when I have stepped forward and I walk out and I get in my office and I go, God, they really just did not receive that well. They continue to blame me and blame everybody but themselves and not accept any responsibility. And if you don't prepare yourself for that ahead of time, it is so seductive and so easy to go right back into that victim mindset of blame, because that goes to blame and that's taking you right down the other path again. And you have to then have grace for yourself because you can see it and not like Mike and I used to do where you go, God, there I go again. Oh my God, I can't believe I just didn't see it again. Instead say,
True.
Gosh, I did it again.
Such an important point, because as we're talking about this, we might be making it sound real easy and like we're perfect, that we all are now evolved somehow. And we always think from the learner mindset and we're always so coach-like, right? We're not. And we need people around us. Yeah, Diane is doing the, like, I'm so evolved dance.
I have a halo over my head. I'm an angel.
Yeah. Sabrina, my new book is coming out around Christmas. It's called The Day I Mastered Humility.
There you go. You heard it here first on the Profit by Design podcast. This really speaks to, though, the importance of surrounding ourselves with people who remind us of our better selves. And I mean, just coming onto this call today, Chad asked, how are you doing, Sabrina? And I said, I'm feeling a little crazed. And he said, well, that's the day you're going to have if that's how you feel. And I was like, yeah, he's right. Surrounding ourselves with people who remind us to stay in learner mindset is a big part of getting better and better at this, because you hear us talking about this now and you're probably thinking, okay, today, learner mindset. I'm going to ask those learner questions, and then you're going to get on a job site, you're going to get into some heated situation. And as soon as we're in a heated situation, our new skills go right out the window. And so that's what, in the exclusive small group coaching program that we have at Tap the Potential, the retreats, being surrounded with other business owners who can be that sounding board and ask a thoughtful learner question to pull us back into, oh yeah, I have a better self who can ask better questions here. because this doesn't happen automatically.
No, definitely not. And also, it's important for everyone to realize that it's more of a lifestyle change to a certain degree, right? Because, in my experience, like just an easy example that, Diane can probably relate to is how many times I went home and just complained and complained and complained to my wife over and over and over again. And she wasn't, my wife wouldn't give me back what I thought she should be giving me back. So I would be like, well, if I can't talk to her, who the hell else am I supposed to talk to? Why can't she help me? Why doesn't she want to, deal with this? And why is she getting frustrated with me complaining all the time? Well, it's because, it wasn't her job to do that, right? And probably when I was coming home complaining and, so judgmental about everything around me and everything's collapsing, I'm sure the fear took over and she became, fearful for, me, my mind, my health, the business, finances, and all these other things that, I shouldn't have been burdening her with to begin with. So, not only did I use that whole entire tool from a business aspect, but I really started with me, again, foundationally, and started right at home, started looking at things differently with how my kids would behave or other family members and how I was behaving and reacting to those things and how I could be more mindful and be, just better person. And then, if you work on that wholeheartedly in your whole entire being, then it translates to everything else. So then it worked. Or if you're coaching sports or anything that you're doing, really everything, you can use those tools to be a better person.
Mike, it reminds me of when we had John Bates on the podcast and Chad and Diane when he was with us at the retreat, and he talked about the mirror neurons and the impact that what we put out to those we love is what we get back. So Mike, as you're going home in a judger mindset and fearful, you're sharing that with your wife. And then I heard all those judger thoughts coming out about why isn't she getting this? And why can't she help me in the way that I need to? And I saw Diane, she's just nodding her head like, yeah, I know exactly what he's talking about. That's the impact that we have in our lives around us, on our families and our loved ones, when we're operating from this judger mindset and bringing that into our homes. And what I've always been amazed about as I coach business owners is how when the change happens in the business, it spills over into the personal life in a very positive way, and personal relationships improve. And that's where I know real change has happened, when I'm hearing my relationships with my wife, my kids, those are better now because of the work that we're doing on the business. And at first it wouldn't make sense, but that is really, I think, the most valuable outcome of this work, this coaching.
I think Sabrina and Mike said it 100% right. It is a lifestyle change. To get to that mindset shift, you can't compartmentalize this and say, I'm going to be that way at work, because your mind won't be in that place. And I think a lot of these things sound really, really simple, and change does occur in the moment when you decide to change. But if you are not taking care of yourself in any way, and realize that in order to have this lifestyle change and create the environment around you that you're building other people up and still holding them accountable, mind you, but building them up. If you're not taking care of yourself, you have nothing left to give anyone else. And you will be that bunny sitting in the grass, just paralyzed by fear, waiting for the next thing to fall next to you. And that place of fear, no good is going to come out of that. You're going to work best, as you have taught us. You're going to work best when you're taking care of yourself. That, for me, looks like getting enough sleep, something that you are, it sounds so stupid in a way that I have to be on the phone and Sabrina's telling me you need to sleep more. Yes, I do. How many hours of sleep are you getting each night, Chad? Tell me the log. And I need that. And it sounds simple, and it's not, because to do that and get more sleep, the kids need to go to bed earlier. Diane and I need to be more intentional with our calendars and when we're going to spend time together and have, some semblance of a connection in our marriage during the week. And there's a lot of other pieces that get to it. And if I can't be that way in one part of my life with my family, I'm not going to be that way anywhere else, no matter how hard I want to. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's the accountability for being your best self.
Yes. And I think, teaching, I started this journey off thinking, I want to be a better person. What does that mean? That's so abstract. And I started thinking in that first year, if I can let some of these negative traits, because I knew that there were things about me I did not like in my behavior towards other people. If I can let these things, these negative traits die with me when I go, meaning I didn't pass them on to our children, then that's a good outcome. Well, that's a good outcome if I don't matter. And how am I ever going to teach children through my actions how not to be? I mean, they learn from what we do. So I can't teach them how not to be. I can teach them how to be through my own actions. And if I want them to have grace, when I make mistakes, which I do, I will freely own them to our children. And our 11-year-old daughter will come to me sometimes and say, hey, Dad, what was your role in that? And, my first thought is, Kate, you're right. What is my role in it?
Accountability to your best self.
Accountability. And then if I want her to learn grace, I will show myself grace in that moment. That is teaching. And that is being, as you say, being your best self there will also be your best self everywhere.
I'll tell you, teaching your kids about this will keep you in check because they will call you out on it, even when you don't want to hear it, because they will. At least ours do.
Yes, no, mine do too. They use their coaching ninja skills on their mother all the time. It's tough.
I think it's awesome. And I think all the things that you've helped us learn, Sabrina, having those things told back to us from our own children is an amazing reflection of not only us, but of you and Mike and the things. Look at the ideas that we've all been exposed to together and that you've helped us learn and see. That's bearing fruit in our children. So I hope you understand
giant ripple effect.
How good that is and how amazing that is. And I hope you feel that.
I totally do. I got goosebumps as you described that. That's my purpose in life, Chad. That's what I'm all about. I appreciate you being here, Chad, Diane, and Mike. You've all been vulnerable today, sharing your journey. And I know you've inspired our profit designers. So profit designers, as you've listened to this and you're thinking, I want some of what they've got. They're thinking, I like how they think. I want to think that way. I want to feel that way. The first step is to take our assessment that we've created for you at tapthepotential.com to help you see where you are in working on your own leadership and how far along you are with creating that highly profitable, great place to work. You can take that assessment at tapthepotential.com/assessment. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, How to Hire the Best Contractors Edition is available for pre-sale now. You can get your copy at tapthepotential.com/book. Chad, Diane, and Mike are all featured in there with their insights and aha moments. It's a very good read. And if you want to be a part of our ambassador group to help entrepreneurs everywhere put an end to the #1 challenge, hiring great people, come on over and join us there. tapthepotential.com/ambassadors. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for having us.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending time with us today. Join our conversation in the Profit by Design podcast Facebook group. Share your thoughts on today's episode, ask us questions, and let us know what you want to hear about next. Visit our website at profitbydesignpodcast.com to access resources from our sponsors and tools we've created for you. Subscribe to the show on whatever platform you're listening to right now. There's a subscribe button right there. Go ahead and hit it so that you always get a notification when we release a new episode. And finally, share our podcast with a friend if you know a friend who would enjoy it. Thanks again for listening. This is real life business. Keep your chin up, keep moving forward. You got this.